is going on, YouTube world? My name is Adam Adler with PragmaticWays.com, and in this video, we're going to be going over the basics of setting up a JUnit test case. Alright, so JUnits are very important. Unit testing your code is so incredibly important. You should really be practicing test-driven development more than anything, and I'll cover test-driven development in a later video, but for this video right now, we're just going to be going over the basics, very, very basics of setting up a JUnit test for a class. Alright, so what we're going to do first is I'm going to test this class here. I'm going to put this class under a few different test cases, alright? So if you've been following along in our Eclipse debugger tutorial, you may be familiar with this class. It is just a very simple person class. We have a string name, and then we have a birth date field, which is going to be of type local date. Our constructor here is going to take in two strings, the name and the birth date. The name, of course, is going to be assigned to the name field, and then the birth date is going to be assigned to what is ever returned from this parse birth date method. And this method is right here. All this does is it accepts the string birth date, and then it parses out the different year, month, and day of month, and then it converts that into a local date data type, and then returns that. So, of course, that comes back as a local date variable, which then it gets assigned to that birth date there. I'll get into these in a minute, but right down here I just have a bunch of setters and getters, standard boilerplate stuff. We don't really need to test that. And then right here is a toString method. We don't really need to test that either. I know some people will have a little bit of a quibble with the statements that I said there, but all in all, for the most part, these are very basic getter and setters. If you want to test them, go right ahead, but realistically, my 2 cents, I don't think it's all that worth it. What I want to test, really, what I'm more focused on are things that actually could break, things that you actually have a little bit of logic in there, and you're not just returning some basic field or something. And what I mean by that is these two methods here. These two methods actually have a tiny bit of logic embedded inside of them. So this one here is a getAge method, and all it's going to do is grab the periodicity between the birth date and the local date.now method, and then it's going to take that period and only extract out the getYears. So this will return an integer or a basic primitive int data type. And then this one down here, this is just a Boolean method, which is going to return true or false if or not the person of question is over 21 or not, or if they are 21 or older, rather. All right, so we're going to go ahead and test these two methods here. We're going to create unit tests for this person class to test these two methods right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my person class. All right, I'm going to go up to File and then New, and then click on Other. And then yours might look a little bit like this. We're going to click on Java and drop that down. We're going to go down to JUnit and drop that down. And then we're going to click on JUnit test case. So I'm going to go ahead and select Next. All right, and just make sure that the name I am doing is the person test, and I am testing the person class. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click Next as well. And then also right here, actually, go ahead and just do JUnit 5, the Jupyter test. You could probably get away with doing JUnit 4 as well. I know that's still very heavily used in the industry. I don't think JUnit 3 is used all that much anymore, so stick with one of these two. If you're just getting started, might as well learn the latest and greatest. Just select this one, which should be at default already anyways. But like I said, we're going to go ahead and select Next now. And now this is going to show us what methods we want to test here. So everything from the object superclass, I'm just going to go ahead and drop that down. We don't need to test any of that. And then like I said, we're not really going to test every single thing. The only methods we're really curious about testing here is this getAge method and this is21 or older method. These are all the setters and getters. That's the overridden toString. That's the constructor. I'm not really too worried about testing these right now, although the constructor could probably be its own test, but as we'll see, we're going to be testing that inherently in itself anyways. But I'll just go ahead and click on Finish then. And now it's going to complain, Eclipse is going to complain to me right now saying, hey, JUnit 5 is not in your build path. Do you want to add it? And of course we want to add that, otherwise we would not be able to run our test cases. So now we can see JUnit 5's all right there. That is great. Don't really care though. Now we have this beautiful new class here called the person test class. Okay, And we can see it already implemented a couple different boilerplate methods for us. And we see we have this test annotation here. So that means that this is a unit test. This class right here is a unit test. And all this test is going to do right now is immediately fail, saying that the test has not been implemented yet. In order to run this right now, we're going to make sure it fails right now. In order to run this, I'm just going to go ahead and run the single test unit test by double-clicking on the getAge method. And then I'm going to go up here and click on, I'll just click on run. All right, and let's see what we get going on here now. We get this really beautiful red bar here, meaning that we did have one failure. Test ran was 1 of 1, and 1 of them failed. If I wanted to run the whole test case, the whole test suite, which in this case is only 2 separate unit tests, I could double click on person test, and again, click on the run button there. And now this will run through all tests. We can see it ran 2 of 2 tests, and this time we had 2 failures. If we click on either one of them, we're going to see why it failed by our failure trace down here. And we can see it failed from the assertion failed error not yet implemented. And that was basically just saying, hey, I want you to fail. If you reach this line here, I want you to fail, saying this test has not been implemented yet. So as of right now, that's exactly what we want per this test case. But realistically, we need to change this test case to make sure it's actually doing what we want it to do. And in that case, or in this scenario example, what we want it to do is validate that the logic in this function is correct. Okay, so how are we going to test this method here? Well, one way we could do it is by creating a person object with a known age, and then just verifying that when we instantiate that person object, his age is what we expect that to be. Because here's the thing of any unit test, in case you don't know. Unit tests, we want to test only really the public interfaces for any given class. And you only can test what you know. So for any unit test, the very basics that goes into it is you're going to give a unit test something that you know, and then you're going to expect it to assert something that is true based on what you already know. So you have something you know, and based on what you know, you expect that test to do something. So in this case, I have something I know. I'm going to create someone who is, let's say, 30 years old. And then I'm going to call this getAge method within my person class, and I'm going to expect that that person is in fact 30. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. First step is we're first going to create someone with a known age. Okay? So I'm going to say person equals new person. And our person constructor, remember, accepts 2 strings. One of them is going to be a name. And the next one is going to be of a certain age. All right. So in this case, given that the year is 2021, this person, sorry, that's what I'm trying to do. Given that the year is 2021 right now, this person will be 30 years old. All right. So now I'm going to say assert true person dot get age is equal to 30. Okay? And then it's going to complain that I haven't imported this, so I'm just going to go ahead and import that from JUnit. And now I'm going to double click on this and click on run. And we can see now the test passes because this does come out true. The problem with this, though, is this is kind of bad code. This is a bad test case to do because it's dependent on the current year, right? Like, for instance, in the year 2022, well, this person's not going to be 30 years old anymore. I'm going to have to go and update this every single year change, and that's just kind of bad code. That's not really a great way of doing that. So we're going to make this a little bit more dynamic so it runs for any given year, and we don't have to come in here and continuously update this method every single time. All right, so in order to do that, what I'm going to do is create a couple little different helper methods here. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say, helper variables I meant instead. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the current year. All right, so the current year, we can get that by getting that from local date.now get year. Here we go. So now this is the current year. So again, in 2021, this will now be 2021. And now I want to say 30 years ago, essentially. So I'll say, I'll call it birth year. Hold that. So birth year is going to equal the current year minus 30. Okay. And now I'll say string birth date is going to equal the birth year plus whatever this is up to here. And I will convert that into a string as long as I actually surround that by double quotes. And delete that double quote, and there we go. So now I can extract this out here and just replace that with that, okay? And now let's just go ahead and verify that this still runs, and it still passes. Oh, see, now we get a... there we go. I accidentally ran the whole test case and not just this one. So let me redo that by selecting only the tests that we're curious about right now. Okay, and that passes. That's great. So that's also a really good trick, is to make sure that you are continuously testing as you go along. You know, if you change a little bit, test a little bit, change a little bit, test a little bit. It's called the red light, green light refactoring method, essentially. And every time you're making change to code, you always want to come back and continuously test your test cases, your unit tests, to make sure that what you've done hasn't broken anything so far. All right, so this code is a little bit ugly now. I'm going to go through a little bit of refactoring here, okay? So first off, we can see that we have 30 here 2 times. So this is duplicate code. So I'm just going to go ahead and refactor this, and I'm going to extract a local variable. And I'm just going to call this age2test. All right. And now that that's extracted out, I'm going to move him above here. I can go ahead and delete this comment now. Okay. So now I have my age to test, and we can see that it has extracted it into both of these instances here, which is great. But now this logic here is kind of self-contained into its own thing. So I'm actually going to create a little helper method here, which will come in handy when I start doing stuff down here as well. So I'm just going to highlight all this stuff here. I'm going to go to refactor and extract method, and I'm going to call this one create person with age. Okay. Let's go ahead and create that, and there we go. That's a lot easier to read now. So now with this test here, I'm going to say age to test is going to be 30. Person is going to be create person with age, which is age to test. In this case, is 30. And now I'm actually, nope, that's actually fine still. And now I just want to assert that the person's age is 30. So let's go ahead and again, we always want to test a little, change a little, test a little, change a little. So let's verify that this test still runs proper. And we get the green light, and we do, which is awesome. All right, so I think this method, we can properly say that it has been unit tested successfully. All right, so let's go ahead and tackle this one down here now. So with this one, I think it would be a good idea to have 2 different test cases essentially. One to test that someone is that someone underneath 21 is not 21, and then we're going to make sure that someone is over 21, well, is over 21. All right. I know that kind of sounds a little bit confusing, but let's just, you'll see what I mean in a minute here. All right, so we're going to say right here, test 20-year-old is not 21 or older. And then I'm going to call this one, actually maybe we'll want 3 because I'm going to call this one test 21-year-old is 21 or older. And I'm going to create one more test case just to make sure that we have, let's see, test a 30-year-old is 21 or older. All right. So now I can pretty much just go ahead and do, let me go ahead and do this one right here. I'm going to copy this stuff down here, or right up here. I'm just going to go ahead and paste that right down here. And for this one, I want this person to be 20 years old. And now I want this assertion. For this one, I'm actually going to say false, because what I want to test now is I want to test that this person is 21 or older. Well, no, because I have a 20-year-old who is not 21 or older, so this should come out false. So that's why I want to assert this here to be false. All right? And I'm just going to go ahead and copy this and paste it down here. This time I want this one to be a 21-year-old, and instead of false, this should be true. And then same thing right here. That was 21, that was supposed to be. And this is supposed to be a 30-year-old. So let's go ahead and run these now, all right? So I can just go ahead and test this one. Make sure that comes out green, and that test successfully passes. Let's run this one, see if this one passes. And it does. And then I'll run this one and see if this passes. And it does as well. So now just for a good sanity check, I'm just going to go ahead and run the whole class here. I'm just going to say person test, run all of them, run all 4 of them. And we see test ran 4 of 4, 0 failures, 0 errors. So that's all great. Let's go ahead and do one more now, and this is actually going to kind of test the constructor essentially, because what happens if we pass in, when we create this person object we see here, what happens if we give it an invalid date, something that it can't parse out properly? Let's see what happens. So let's see, test invalid birth date throws exception. All right, we should expect this to throw an exception, okay? So I'm going to show you first sort of the bad way of doing this, okay? So we're going to say person equals new person, if I can type again, and we're going to give it a name, and then we're going to give it a bad birth date, all right? We're going to say bad birth date here. Of course, that's not going to parse out into a proper local date, so let's see what happens here. I don't really need to do anything with this. I'm just going to suppress the warning for unused. I don't really care about that. All right, so now let's just run this real quick and let's see what happens. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and double click that, press the run button there. And we can see, hey, this test case failed here. And the reason it failed is because we got a number format exception for input string. You know, it was not able to parse out this into a valid number, which is needed for within the logic in our person constructor, if you see here. All right. So how can we fix this now? Or not fix this, but how can we test this? Because realistically, this is what we wanted to happen. We wanted to throw an exception because we know that that's not really what we wanted to do. Now, realistically, over in here in our main program, or whatever it is, we would probably want to catch this somewhere and you know, handle this exception properly, or maybe even handle it within here itself. But in this case right now, I'm saying that we don't want this class, for whatever reason, to actually handle this exception. We want this person, this class's caller, in this case main, to handle that exception for us. So if that's the case, then we want this test to make sure that it throws the exception properly. So in order to test that now, like I said, here's sort of the bad way of doing that. We can wrap this in sort of a try-catch, all right? So I'm going to highlight that all. I'm going to go to source, surround with a try-catch block. All right, and what I want this to catch is I want it to catch a number exception format dot class. Nope, sorry, just a number exception format. Oh, sorry, number format exception. That was silly. Number format exception. All right. So if it does this, if it catches this, then we're going to say do nothing. This is expected. Otherwise, if it catches anything else, just a basic exception of any other type, well, then we want it to fail. And we're going to say, I don't know, through a different exception than we expected. Okay. And I probably need to, yeah, so if you're not familiar, before what we saw was that it added in the static assertion.fail. So you can see here I have assert.fail, and I can just delete that. And now it's going to complain and say, hey, do you want to add the static import for that? And I could say sure, but most of the time I don't really do that. I just call it with the class name itself. So we could also do the exact same thing by just say assert.fail. All right, so now with that out of the way, I will double click this and rerun this test case here. And now this passes. And also, I don't think I showed you before, we can rerun the test by also doing this button right here, rerun test. That's probably a better way that I should have been showing you all how to do that instead. But anyways, like I said, this is the bad way of testing this, of making sure that something throws something. A better way to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and copy or comment all of that out. A better way of doing this, well, actually I don't want to comment you guys out. I want to keep you. All right. A better way of doing this is to use JUnit's exception handling, essentially. If you're in JUnit 4, you are going to want to do this real quick, and this is a very easy way of doing it. Number format exception dot class. All right. So we're going to put in this attribute for this annotation here, and that's just going to say, hey, this test case is expected to throw a number format exception. But we can see that we are using JUnit 5, so we're getting an error here saying that this is undefined for this type. So instead, what we need to do is something a little bit different. And with JUnit 5, we have sort of this little pattern here. We have the assertions dot throws, assertions dot assert throws. Okay. So we wanted to throw again a number format exception dot class. So it says, hey, throw this when this happens. And what this is going to be, we're just going to create sort of a little lambda expression here, lambda function. All right. And what we want inside this lambda expression is this code right here. All right. So if you're not used to, Java 8 and lambda expressions or anything else like that, this might look a little bit confusing to you, this sort of syntax here. But basically all this is saying is, hey, we want to test something here. We're going to test this code right here, and when we run this code, we expect it to throw this exception here. All right, so I can just go ahead and save that now and rerun the test, and that passes. Okay, so perfect. And let's just go ahead and rerun the whole thing now, again for another sanity check. And there we go. 5 of 5 tests all passed. We can drop this down and see all 5 of them passed properly. We even see how long each test case took to pass, or took to execute rather. We got no errors, no failures. Yeah, I think we could probably test a few more edge cases here or there, but I think for the most part, I'm pretty satisfied with this. And again, this is just a very basic introductory level tutorial on how to set up some basic unit test cases. So if you liked this video, please do hit the like button. Comment down below if you want to see more of these type of, going through JUnit test cases and maybe learn a little bit of test-driven development. We could go deeper into some JUnit stuff. Yeah, comment down in below if you want to see that or not. If you do, and you do comment, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Click on that little notification bell, and you can get notified when I come out with new videos on anything Java, like these JUnit test cases, or even going through the Eclipse debugger, or learning about more refactoring techniques within Eclipse, or whatever else. Until next time, everyone, happy coding.